that really warped my sense of who I was too. And as a young, impressionable child, I believed in the infallibility of my parents. So I didn't ever question that the problem was me and that there was something wrong with me, that I could just never do things right. And, I developed these beliefs about myself and my understanding of my identity from all these experiences. And then I went to school, and, I firmly believe that we train people on how to teach us or how to treat us. And so I would go to school understanding that I'm a big giant piece of crap and that, I have no value as a human being. And so, of course, I was the outcast kid at school that, everybody beat up and made fun of. And it just reinforced my self-beliefs. And I went all the way through high school and out into the adult world, angry about that and resentful about what I perceived was my role in life, but never aware that maybe I was wrong about what was happening or that I had the power to change any of that. And so, I immediately became an alcoholic as soon as I had access to alcohol. And alcohol made me feel better about myself when I was drinking, and it introduced me into a crowd of people that seemed to accept me. And I didn't understand what I was doing at the time, but I was searching for acceptance and approval everywhere that I went.
Hey everybody, and welcome back to the Mental Purpose Podcast. I'm your host, Ian Lobos, and I'm super glad you're here because today we're going to get real deep with childhood trauma and masculinity. And if that scared you, you need to listen. So let me remind you of our mission. Our mission is to elevate, educate, empower, enrich, and evolve men to be on purpose as freaking possible. Why? So that they can reveal their most authentic self and live the most regret-free life possible and most fulfilling life possible. That's it. It's so simple, right? But most people aren't doing it. But guess what? You're here to learn, just like I did, just like Aaron did, just like everybody here did in some capacity, right? Through these shows, unless it's your first time, and welcome. But today, my guest is Justin Long. He's amazing, absolutely amazing. I had a brilliant conversation, very deep about childhood traumas, making meaning of things. I'm going to go into that in just a second, but let me remind you of our free resources. If you haven't already joined our Men on Purpose community on Facebook, you got to. We are cranking up membership. Aaron and I are adding all kinds of free resources in there. We've got coaching in there. We've got literally everything you can imagine. We've got some new products we're going to be launching in there to help you guys. And we've got all different types of stuff. So whether you're at the beginning of your journey or you're a super high level guy that's just not fulfilled, but you're making a ton of money, we've got you. And then remember, we also have our front runner events, our personal involvement retreats. They are the most purposeful thing you can do in a 4 or 5 day weekend to get yourself turned, shifted on your axis, and just blasting forward with purpose and intention and a plan and skills and new habits and structure and curriculum and a plan, an action plan moving forward. So whatever you need from us, we got you, whether it's one-on-one coaching, group coaching, our personal involvement, front runner retreats, our free resources like this podcast or the Mental Purpose community, whatever. Just get involved. Just take action because people on purpose take action. That's it. And if you haven't already subscribed to the podcast, go on iTunes or wherever you subscribe or wherever you listen and hit that subscribe button on Mental Purpose Podcast. Okay, cool. You ready? Let me tell you about Justin Long. So Justin Long is an author. He's a business owner. He's the host of a podcast called Straight from the Horse Doctor's Mouth, which he produces with his wife, Erica. His best-selling book series, The Adventure of the Horse Doctor's Husband, has been enjoyed by readers all over the world. And while his wife's mission is to make the world a better place for horses, Justin's mission is to make the world a better place for people by helping men learn to understand themselves and grow into their fullest potential. Sound familiar? That's why this episode's so damn good. So his current book is called The Righteous Rage of a 10-Year-Old Boy. It's raw. It's an intense examination of his childhood and, frankly, most of our childhoods because our parents didn't know what they were doing. They didn't work on themselves. They didn't have personal development in the capacity we do today. So we got to give them a little bit of a break, all right? So the events that formed his negative self-image and his journey throughout therapy to overcome it all, we talk about emotionally damaged parents, we talk about seeking approval, we talk about primary caregiver failure, we talk about being a supportive partner, forgiveness, trauma therapy, breaking the cycle and actually letting go. We talk about traditional gender roles, cultural excuses, being at peace when you become aware, the mob mentality, toxic masculinity, comparing your insides to others' outsides, revealing your most authentic self, vulnerability, freeing yourself from distraction, communication challenges, male emotions, your value and how to find it. This is a dynamite episode. And even if you don't associate the childhood that Justin had, like I didn't associate with that childhood. I didn't have a similar type of childhood, but my childhood still had trauma in it, just like yours did. Whether your parents beat the shit out of you or loved you too much, you got trauma. And we're going to teach you how to release that. Find your real, authentic inner self. Rock that shit out. You ready? Here we go. Enjoy. All right, Justin, let's rock and roll, man.
I am glad to be here.
I'm glad to have you here. Like I said before we started, your one sheet that the bookers sent over was really impressive and had a lot to do with what I love talking to other men about, which is their stuff, their trauma, their shit, the fear, the pain, the stuff that they got bred into them from childhood and the events that happened to them and subsequently how they form their stories and their meanings around their life and what they are for the world. And then my fascination is how we can help men unravel that, reform that clay, totally new shape, and actually like live authentically, reveal that authentic self, and live the most fulfilling and regret-free life possible. That's what we're going to be doing today. So for all the audience listening, you guys are in for a real treat. And this one's not going to be might not be as fun because this is where the real work is. But if you are not happy with your life, if you're not happy with who you are, if you're not where you want to be or have the relationships with yourself or with others that you want to have, if you're not fulfilled, if you're living with regrets, this is the episode that you are going to want to listen to, right?
I hope so. Because, man, everything you just said describes most of my life.
Right. So, no, we'll deliver, man. We're going to deliver super high. So tell us your background. How are we now on this call together with you as an expert?
Man, it is the journey to get here has been amazing, but it started off rough and most of it sucked. I got to say, I started off with a really emotionally damaged set of parents, and my dad was just the typical guy that can only display anger. You know, he ruled me with the iron fist and spent every waking moment, from my perspective, he spent every waking moment just dominating me. And my mom was, I mean, she was a completely different way. But the two of them together, you know, had zero emotional tools to pass on to me when they're trying to raise a child. So my dad was a child of his own trauma, and I don't think that he ever got over that. But he, and you know, I turned to alcohol in my adult life to deal with my childhood. My dad turned to work. He became a workaholic. And so he would work all day at his job and come home and work half the night out in the garage on whatever project and, you know, trying to keep the house standing up and the cars running and all that. And as soon as he got home from work, my job was to be helping him do whatever. And I had a long list of chores that I had to do every day. But, you know, one of the examples that I use in my book is chopping firewood. It was my job to cut this and chop the firewood and stack it. And my dad would come home from work and we would go out and inspect that firewood stack. And instead of getting a pat on the back for having it full, I would get a spanking for all of the pieces of firewood that were sticking out of line a little bit. And so, you know, that times 1,000 with all the different chores was the way that my relationship with him worked. It was that he would have an impossible expectation. I would fail to meet it. I would work as hard as I could, and then I would fail and get punished. And that really fucked up my understanding of who I am and what my capabilities are as a little kid. And on the other end of that spectrum was my mom, who was not a disciplinarian, but she couldn't handle the excitement and energy of a little kid. And so if I would be running through the house making noise and doing the typical 6-year-old kid things, you know, I would get in trouble if it was the wrong day. And she would make me pull the trash dumpster in from out back, and I would sit in the trash can and wait for my dad to come home to spank me for whatever it was that I did. And so, you know, that really warped my sense of who I was too. And as a young, impressionable child, I believed in the infallibility of my parents. So I didn't ever question that the problem was me and that there was something wrong with me, that I could just never do things right. And, you know, I developed these beliefs about myself and my understanding of my identity from all these experiences. And then I went to school, and, you know, I firmly believe that we train people on how to teach us or how to treat us. And so I would go to school understanding that I'm a big giant piece of crap, and that, I have no value as a human being. And so of course I was the outcast kid at school that, everybody beat up and made fun of, and it just reinforced my self-beliefs. And I went all the way through high school and out into the adult world, angry about that and resentful about what I perceived was my role in life, but never aware that maybe I was wrong about what was happening, or that I had the power to change any of that. And so, I immediately became an alcoholic as soon as I had access to alcohol. And alcohol made me feel better about myself when I was drinking, and it introduced me into a crowd of people that seemed to accept me. And and I didn't understand what I was doing at the time, but I was searching for acceptance and approval everywhere that I went. And most of the ways that displayed itself was either in people pleasing, or just ridiculous competition, with me feeling like I have to prove my value and worth all day, every day, to everybody that I meet and everybody that I see. And it wasn't until I was in my mid-30s that I found my way into a recovery program and got sober, which set me on a path that 10 years later ended me up in therapy. And I was able to get a grip on who I am and the truth about myself, and change the way that I feel about myself, and actually get my life turned around.
Damn, man. It's interesting because too often we hear stories like that where parents are not doing any of the work. They're not doing anything for themselves. And for a little kid, like, I don't know if you have kids?
No, I do not.
Okay. So I have two little kids. My daughter's almost 6, my son's almost 2. And I think about them and I'm like, man, like, if the house life, like you were describing, is just totally traumatic and nothing's ever good enough, and you're constantly living in fear, then you go to school and you're getting your ass kicked and you're not accepted there. I mean, what kind of psyche does that form and foundation does that form for a little kid? Hence the reason why parents' number one job is to improve themselves so that they can have a better childhood relationship, or a better relationship with their child. And subsequently, hopefully, their child turns out a little bit less damaged than most of us have. You know what I mean?
Right.
Then I'm sure there's going to be damage in other things, but like, your story is not uncommon, which is crazy. Right. And even for guys like me, even for guys like me who I thought I had a nice upbringing, but when I look back on it, there were so many traumatic things that formed who I was. I feel like I'm fortunate enough to have not turned to alcohol, but I turned to work. And I hustled and hustled and hustled because that's where I found my value. That's where I found my approval. Money bought me things. It bought me into different circles. It helped me become wanted and accepted and needed. And I was already used to conditional love anyway. So why not add another condition? And then the problem was, when I lost all that money in my late 20s, all the conditions came true. And it was like, oh, well, you don't have any money anymore? Well, you can't hang with our car club because you don't have that car, and you can't hang with us because you can't go on these trips. You can't, and it jacked me up again. But that's when the real search for my true identity, and to clear that trauma and that past program, which, by the way, it wasn't bad. Like, I never got beat up or spanked or anything like that, but it was just my parents' traumas, their bullshit that they never worked on, fed right into me. I was the only child. There was no leverage. It was all on me. And my parents didn't do anything wrong. They just didn't do everything that would serve the situation in the best manner.
Right.
Yeah. So what?
I think it's I was just going to say that when your primary caregivers fail you like that, and you don't have a resource at all, because that's your only real resource for knowledge, for security, for safety, for emotional support, and for someone to tell you the truth about yourself until you can figure it out for yourself. But the other thing that I think is so important that most parents fail to teach their kids is that your value doesn't come from external things. And when you're measuring your worth as a human being by whatever it is that you want to use as a measuring tape that's on the outside, those things can change. The job can go away. Those things you don't have any control over, but they also don't define who you are. And I was in my 40s before I understood that concept. And I spent most of my life trying to build my self-esteem around what I thought other people thought of me. So, I always had to try to impress people or go overboard and be ridiculous. And then as soon as, the human failing happened and they didn't pay enough attention to me, I felt rejected and unworthy and all of that stuff. You can't, external validation is never a long-term answer to the feeling of not feeling good enough about yourself.
Yeah, that's so true. And it's something that we, in our coaching practice, in our front runner events, anybody that just reaches out and calls me from this podcast, which is, I probably talk to 25 people a week who reach out from hearing us talk about different concepts that register with them. It is amazing how much of the world, especially the men of the world, are programmed to be providers and provide something of value. But it's not programmed from the internal, it's programmed from the external. So it's either hard work or money or security and safety. And so when you look back on a 10-year period without being super aware, you're like, oh my God, did I even live for me one day? Is the golf trip or the boat I bought or the sports car I bought or the house I live in, is any of that shit real? And that's what most men, even not high level or not, that's what they face is, oh my God, I'm not living for me.
We're still defining our roles as men in society as if we live in the jungle and we're out fighting to live or die and starve to death or not starve to death every day.
Right.
And none of those things apply to the real world. And it's such an antiquated way to look at what you're supposed to be doing with your life. And, even in gender roles, I met my wife when I was 38 years old, and she's a veterinarian. She owns her own business, and she made way more money than I made at that time and was way more successful. I mean, she had confidence. She knew what she was doing with her life. She'd been already on that road for 20 years. And I didn't have any of those things. And I had a hard time reconciling where I was at with where she was at, and then us being in a relationship together. Like, as a man, I'm supposed to be the breadwinner, and I have to make more money, and I have to do this, and I have to do that, and I have to bring all these things to the relationship. I have to take care of her. And, like, she didn't need any of those things from me. And I'm really glad that I had that experience because it made me stop and reconsider what's actually important. And do those things even define me and who I am and my value and what I bring to the world? And is it important how much money I make, or is it important that I'm happy doing what I'm doing? Because I spent most of my life trying to be the primary breadwinner, doing jobs that I hated because they paid more than the jobs that I wanted. And that at some point you realize that you're miserable. You've made all the money, but you're miserable, and you have zero things to look back on and be excited about when you look at what you've done with your life. And I'm so glad that I saw that at 38, and I didn't have to wait till I was 58 or 78, or I see some people that don't ever come to that understanding, and I think it's a horrible way to live.
Yeah, I mean, maybe they just don't want to know. But
yeah,
if my dad said to me, I said to him about my real estate business. He said it to me when I was leaving his business, which I was in business with him for a very long time, in the shipping business. And I loved it because I love the shipping business because I love being with him every day. Being able to work with my dad, side by side and grow this company with him and just be with him, that was exciting for me. And I learned to love the shipping business because of that. And he said to me when I left, he said, you have to do this. Like, you have to go. And I was like, Dad, I mean, this is hard. Like, it's our family business. And he said, yeah, but I got to let you go. You got to chart your own course. If you don't, you'll live with regret, and that's no way to live. And then when I said to him my dad has taught me so many great lessons. But when I called him a couple years ago, maybe even like 2 years ago, and I said, look, the real estate business, sales business isn't for me anymore. I built this big company and I was making a lot of money and I'm just unfulfilled. There's no passion in it. There's no fulfillment. What do I do? Do I walk away from a business generating me a shit ton of cash every year just to follow my dream and my passion and find fulfillment? And he's like, yeah, 100%.
Yep.
Because if you think regret now, Try being in your 60s and not being able to go back. Try being in your 80s and not being able to do anything about it. You don't have the energy, the stamina, the flexibility, the drive. It's gone. Not to say that when you're 80, your drive is gone, but you know, when you go a whole lifetime and then all of a sudden you realize at that point, the regret you'll feel is worse than you've ever felt in your entire life. So whatever you want to do, just go chase it, because you know if you fail and fall flat on your ass, you've got the skills, habits, talent to build yourself back up again and again if you need to. But you'll never regret not doing it, or you'll never regret doing it. You'll regret not doing it. And that was hard as hell to walk away from that business and follow the coaching route. And it's interesting because my partner and I yesterday, we were talking about it. Well, yesterday when we're recording this, and I said to him, you know, it's crazy. People keep saying to me, I want to be as passionate like you are about coaching. And I came to this realization that I'm not passionate about coaching. I'm passionate about building systems, processes, procedures, and curriculum that help people transform their lives and get what they actually want out of life. My fulfillment comes from coaching. And I got really clear on that yesterday. And that came from not wanting to live with regrets. That's why the one piece of our mission is, you know, the finite piece, the absolute non-negotiable, is to live a life with no regrets, because you can never turn the clock back, you know, ever.
I think that's so important. And it's, for me, it's been part of my journey is to understand who I really am. When I stop trying to live for other people and start living for me and understand who I am, what I like, what it is that I want to do. And when I started finding those answers, I was so far away and going a completely different direction in my life than where it was that I wanted to be going. And I think that finding that true direction, A, it took time, but B, it also took a supportive partner. That was one of the biggest gifts that my wife has given me, is allowing me the freedom to figure out what it is that I want to do and who it is that I'm trying to become. And the satisfaction in my life is so night and day to where it's ever been before. And I've been all over the world and done a lot of crazy things in my life, but it was all in pursuit of trying to feel differently about myself. And the only real way to do that is for me to understand who I am and to be true to who I am and not make compromises to try to impress other people, right? And it's just, I hate to see so many people that are doing stuff that they don't want to do for someone else who probably doesn't even understand the sacrifice that's being made or appreciate it. And it's all for nothing anyway, because at the end of your life, you know, if you've been miserable the whole time, you're not going to be proud of the things that didn't matter. You know, when you talk to old people who are at the end of a happy, fulfilled life, it's all about the relationships that they've made along the way and the creations that they've been able to contribute to the world, you know, whatever it happens to be. But it's always the people who are passionate about what they're doing are the ones that have a satisfied life. And, you know, there's no time like right now to turn that around and get on the right path if you're not doing that already. Yeah.
I have one question I want to ask you, and then we're going to get into some action steps, because I know that somebody's in their car right now going, all right, Justin, well, tell me how to do it, buddy. You know what I mean? Like, it sounds really great. Tell me how to do it.
Yep.
But first I want to ask you, one of the biggest things that I do in our coaching business is we've got to have forgiveness, and we've got to clear the space where the regret and resentment lies from or stems from with a parent or a teacher. Did you ever get any clearance, or were you ever able to talk to your dad about your childhood experience and actually get clear from that?
You know, I got sober in 2008, and that was when I really started trying to come to terms with all of this stuff. But my dad was killed in a car wreck in 2004. So while my relationship with him had improved slightly, like I joined the Army to get away from home the second I was done with high school. And I would go back occasionally as an adult, and we, you know, slowly trying to just forget and pretend like nothing had happened and sort of start from scratch as an adult. But, you know, we made a little bit of progress down that road, but I never ever talked to him about any of the stuff that happened. And today, you know, now that I have the understanding that I do of all of the things, you know, I have the perspective of some time and some knowledge about how psychology works and cycles of generational behaviors and all that. I would love to sit down with my dad and just really have a heart-to-heart, I think that would make a great podcast. If I could sit down with my mom and my dad, who are both dead, and really talk about this stuff, I think that it would help me get some, fill in some gaps in my understanding. But I think it would help a lot of people who go through the same sort of challenges with their parents, because everybody has a challenging relationship with their parents in one way or another.
Totally.
And I think that it's still important, even though my dad was dead, it was really important for me to go through the process in therapy of writing down all of the stuff and talking it out and getting down to the core of the feelings. And, one of the really big things that happened for me in therapy, I did EMDR, which is trauma therapy.
Oh,
and,
yeah.
We had to go back to those childhood memories of all of those traumatic events. And it was mostly emotional abuse on my end, but looking at those from my adult perspective and realizing that, I might have gotten a spanking for stacking the firewood, but it's not because I did anything wrong. It was because, my dad was messed up and warped in his understanding of how to encourage me to be the best that I could be. And, we went and visited hundreds of those types of childhood events and went through the memories, and every one of them basically had the same ending. And that's what my book is all about, is reattaching, different emotions to those memories and understanding that I was not a failure in any of those situations, that I did all the things that I was supposed to do. The fact that my mom put me in the trash can doesn't mean that I was a piece of trash. It meant my mom was fucked up. And that had nothing to do with me. It never had anything to do with me. And being able to understand those things and just recognize that my parents were broken people, and then forgive them for that. That they were raised by broken people too, and broken people make broken people. It happens over and over until someone breaks the cycle. And I recognize those things, and I understand where my parents were at, and I don't harbor any resentment against them anymore. And I think that's a really important part of the process.
Yeah, I mean, for people listening right now who are like, man, I had these fucked up things happen to me when I was a kid. How do I forgive? How do I let that go? I'm going to tell you, my answer is you just make a decision to do it. You make a decision to stop holding on to it and let it stop powering you, and decide on how to get something else to power you. What's your example or answer for that? Like, how do you do that? How do you just let it go? I mean, it was so traumatic. It was so hard. It was so this. I got the cigarette burns on my arm to prove it. Like, how do you do that? How do you just let it go?
I think for me, a lot of it was getting outside of myself and kind of getting a third-party perspective on my life and what I was doing. And my therapist did a great job of shining the flashlight on the obvious things, like, there's a guy that's in the ground. He's been dead for 16 years, and he's dictating everything that you do. I mean, he's not doing that from any living point, no vantage point anywhere in the world. It's all inside your head that's happening. And I think just finally realizing that, I'm letting a ghost in my head drive my insecurities and my decisions and the relationships that I have and the way that I feel about myself. And I absolutely have the power to stop doing that. And so, like you said, it's a decision to take control and no longer be dominated by someone else, whether it's a memory or a person. And those things in the past happened, and they were messed up, and I was a victim of that, and that sucked, and that's okay, because if I hadn't gone through all of that stuff, I wouldn't have the comparison point to be able to look at where I'm at today and compare it to where I started out and feel great about myself and the progress that I've made. So I think that's really important too, is understanding that everything had to happen for me to be who I am and get where I am. And I'm probably, unlike a lot of people, I get excited every time I have a birthday, because every year of my life for the last 10 years has been better than the year before it. And, that gives me hope. I have so much to look forward to. I don't think that I've even hit my best days yet. I think all of that is still in front of me, because I've got a ton of potential, and I've got a lot of energy, and I've got resources to do things and be amazing, and all of the things that I always wanted to be and never believed in myself to do. And I never had that before. I was probably 35, 36 years old, and actually having a sense of purpose and a sense that I have value and I have something to contribute to the world, and that I haven't hit my potential cap yet. Like, that's exciting for me.
That's very exciting. I want to ask you a question about, you had mentioned something before, and I just know that there's somebody out there. I'm thinking of someone very specific in mind. I'm not going to say who it is, who had the same kind has the same kind of situation you did with a your spouse who is the breadwinner, so to speak, and dealing with that, reversal of traditional gender roles. How did you move through that, or accept that, or let it go, or whatever you want to say? How did you get past that?
That happened for me at a good time in my life, I think, because I had already examined and rejected a lot of beliefs that I had about the world and my place in it and other people's place in it. And, I grew up in an environment where I learned very strict beliefs about, people based on their sexual identity and their race and all of these things. And, I was in my 30s before I started really trying to examine why I even have these beliefs and ideas in my head, and I started overturning those things. So I had made a ton of progress on changing all kinds of ideas, and by the time I got to gender roles in a marriage, I was very, very willing to reject what I had in my head as probably being wrong, because most of the things that I was raised to believe, I now believe were wrong. So
Yeah.
I think the critical part of all of that is just being willing to examine what you believe and why you believe, and be willing to change your mind.
Sounds simple enough. It really sounds simple enough, but it goes so deep, so much deeper than that, because the beliefs that were instilled in us as a kid, most of them, for most of us, are not right.
Right.
I mean, maybe they're not wrong, but they don't serve our lives at all anymore.
It's what somebody else believes.
It's with somebody. Yeah, I mean, there was a really one of the early like personal development courses I did. Somebody said it was about this woman in her kitchen making a leg of lamb and putting the lamb in this pan, but she cut the like 6 inches of the end off. And she watched her mom do that, and she said, "Hey mom, by the way, the pan's big enough, like you don't have to cut the end off." She goes, "Yeah, well, that's just what you do." And so the girl started making the leg of lamb for her family, and the husband said, "Why are you cutting the end off? Like the whole thing fits in the pan. Is there some kind of secret or anything?" And she goes, "You know what? I don't know. I've just been watching my mom and my grandmother do it." So they go back to the grandmother, and the grandmother said, "I don't know, but my mom used to do it because she couldn't afford a pan big enough, so she would just cut it off." So literally that belief that you have to cut the end of the lamb off, like that sounds so simple, but that's how beliefs span generations. Nobody questions
Absolutely.
it. And all of a sudden it's like, well, I'm spending 30 minutes sawing through a bone when I don't have to, because nobody understood the genesis of it until now. But that actually is just a small, like, scratching of the surface of how we actually get beliefs from our parents, because they're just instilled. They're based on fear or insecurities or things like that, or being safe, hiding from their parents, things like that. There's a question I want to ask you about culture. I live in Los Angeles, and there's a lot of different cultures here, and it's interesting because I come from a Sicilian family. And there is a cultural excuse, in my opinion. We're Italian, that's what we do. We're Irish, that's what we do. We're French, that's what we do. We're Middle Eastern, that's what we do. And how, in your opinion, does that? It's an excuse to me, because it's an excuse to not break through and do the work. And like, in your opinion, how does someone get through that, especially when they're in a deep culture? You know what I mean? Like really deep-seated culture that has very long, thousands of years beliefs. How does someone break that, knowing that they've got to deal with their parents or the rest of their family, and that they're going to be different now, or they're going to stand up to something they never had? And how do you do that? How do you break that cycle?
I think it's really hard, and it's not one like that's one of the things I didn't have to deal with. And most of that because I've always been on the outside. I never felt plugged into my family, and I never felt plugged into a group of any real sort. but
Yeah.
it's absolutely everywhere. And it's so much of it is just like what we were talking about. Like, this is just how we were raised. This is the way we've always done it. And I don't know why I do this, but I have an example that I use on the rare occasion that we ate a steak when I was a kid. My dad always burned them to a crisp, and so I went into adulthood believing that the only way to eat a steak is well done. And I was like, I think I was 33 the first time that someone talked me into eating a medium rare steak at a steakhouse. And that was one of the early events that just shattered my whole understanding of how the world works, you know, because up until that point, I hadn't really questioned any of the things that my parents taught me that I just believed because this is how we did it in my family. But, that I realized that medium rare steak was amazing. And I realized every steak that I'd ever had before that was horrid. And I've been wrecking that all my life. But when that's the way it's always been done in our family, I think that we unconsciously, because we're tribal, we unconsciously just continue these things and teach our kids that this is how we do it. And I don't think that there's anything wrong with being tribal. But the problem in our society happens when we become so tribal that we can't tolerate anybody who's not in our tribe. And when we weaponize our belief systems and our traditions, and say that if this is the only way it can be, and if you don't do it this way, then I will kill you, and you can't be part of any of this collective. And so again, I really think that it's about understanding why you believe what you believe, and also having a realistic awareness of how important it is in the grand scheme of things. And is this a deal breaker issue? Is this something that I am willing to go to the mat and fight and potentially lose or die over? Am I willing to make a giant sacrifice for this belief? And I will tell you, for 99% of them, the answer is no. They're just not that important. But until you examine it and make that a conscious decision rather than a knee-jerk reaction, it will always be a go to the mat and die for it decision.
Yeah, well, it's emotionally charged. And we saw that with the last election. I mean, it was a fucking embarrassment to this country. And regardless of who you were voting for, it was a fucking embarrassment. And I mean, I have friends in Europe, I have friends in the Middle East, I have friends in Asia who are like, wow, man, are you going to stay there? And I said, that's a big question. I'm not sure. Let's see how this actually pans out. But from what it looks like right now, I mean, this isn't a proud day in America. I don't care what you believe in, and if you are right now listening to this and saying, "Oh, Ian, you're so wrong. You couldn't be any more wrong," then maybe you need to rewind this and take a listen to what we have just said about belief patterns and where they were instilled from, and why you're willing to go to the mat and die for this. But I guarantee you, with a gun to your head, you would change your belief pattern in a second. 99% of those people would change your belief. The hardcore one, the one that's climbing the Capitol building to try and do whatever they were going to do, you'd change your belief in a heartbeat. You're not married to that. You're married to that based on fear and based on the tribalism and the inclusion of the rest of these morons that believe the same thing you do. Yep. Fair.
I mean,
that's just
groupthink is so powerful.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's that mob mentality. I think I've been total victim of that myself, and doing things that I actively don't believe in simply because the group of people that's around me is going that direction, and I want to feel accepted and included more than I want to do what I believe in, and that's a dangerous place to be. And I think a lot of people get sucked into that. It's that feeling of acceptance is more important than anything else.
I mean, what do they do though? Aren't you just going to be? Let's break that down for a second for people that are listening who are just starting to be kind of come aware and the light is shining in a little bit. I mean, doesn't your resentment and regret continue to build, and then your substance abuse or however you avoid? Aaron and I in our coaching business, in our front runner retreats, call them angles of avoidance. And they don't have to just be hardcore stuff like gambling and drugs and alcohol. They can be golf on the weekends, or 6 hours of football, or not coming home until your kids are in bed because you don't want to deal with them. There's a lot of angles of avoidance. I mean, I shot a video on this a couple of months ago back in July in our Men on Purpose Facebook group, our Facebook community. I had 55 angles of avoidance. Woo. And doesn't that just continue to perpetuate how somebody's already damaged anyway? They're seeking fulfillment and love and inclusion in these groups. And then all of a sudden they're doing things against their will potentially, but they just have to be fit. They have to fit in. And now they're just compounding the amount of trauma and bullshit that's in their brain and in their psyche because they're literally against the grain in every aspect of their entire life.
Definitely. And for me, I think a lot of that developed because my circle of people was so small to begin with. And I worked as a civilian mechanic on a military base, and most of the guys that I worked with were veterans, and and there's a lot of emotional trauma in that subset of society all by itself. But there's also a lot of toxic masculinity and machismo and just bullshit. Everybody happened to be the toughest guy so that nobody realizes that maybe they're not the toughest guy, right? And I was total victim of that. But that was my entire peer group. That was who I worked with. I hung out on the weekends and drank with the same guys that I worked with. I didn't have anybody outside of that circle. And that was part of the problem for me, is that I didn't have any place to go. For me to stop doing this stuff that I don't really like doing, that means I have to abandon everyone that I know, and then I'm completely alone. And I'm probably still stuck working with these guys, which makes it awkward too.
Which is weird, yeah.
It wasn't until I met my wife and moved to Florida and got introduced to a completely different group of people that was much more in alignment with what I found important in the world. It blew me away. Like I didn't know that those people existed. Again, because I didn't have any exposure to anybody else. It was just like, when I was in my 20s and I didn't understand why everybody else looked like they had their shit together and I felt like a train wreck on the inside. It's because I didn't have anything else to compare myself to. I was comparing the way I felt to the way everybody else looked. And the same thing happened with, what I believed in and the people that I was around. I didn't know that there were other people out there because I just hadn't run across them. So I think one of the big steps for maybe trying to extricate yourself from a situation like that is, once you've figured out, what you do believe and what direction you want to go, is to don't be afraid to replace the people in your life with different people. And there's so many ways to meet people these days. The social avenues are all over the place compared to 10 or 15 years ago and any time before that. So I think being willing to step out of the comfort zone and go meet some strangers and try to put some people in your life that are more in alignment with what you believe is a great way to start. And doing that in a social setting where you have control and you can walk away and there's no hard feelings if that doesn't work out, we try something different, right? But be willing to take a risk and do that, and be willing for it to not work and try something else. If it doesn't work out on the first try, don't quit. It's being committed to finding some change.
But isn't that real power? Being able to go into a subset. I mean, like I've met a lot of people out here in LA. I don't call all of them back after we hang because I realized that it just didn't fit what I was looking for, and there was nothing wrong with it. It just didn't fit what I was looking for because I'm very cool, like confident in that, what I'm looking for and where I'm looking to invest my time. But you said something. You said something I kind of want to dig into a little bit, and I think this is a challenge with all human beings, not just men. But you said comparing your insides to others' outsides. That's a great line, and I learned that a long time ago in a personal development seminar, like probably 2012, where you cannot compare how you feel inside to how other people are looking like they feel on the outside. It's a dangerous thing. It's maybe the most deadly thing you can do, is assume that because of what someone looks like, that they have their shit together, versus you who are feeling on the inside. 100% agree. Because guess what? That guy that you're looking at, he's looking at you the same exact way. Like, man, that guy's got his shit together, And and you're thinking the opposite. And so, how can somebody like, how can they combat that? How can they start to shift that mindset and look at everybody else without comparison?
It's really hard not to compare yourself, but the first thing to know is that if somebody looks like they really got their shit together, you don't know them very well. And the better you get to know anybody, the more you realize that we're all the same, and we all have doubts and fears, and we don't know 100% what we're doing, and we're figuring it out as we go. I listen to a lot of podcasts with like people at the very top end of their game, whether it's sports or business or whatever it is. And every one of them talks about the fact that they have that, they feel like a fraud. They don't know as much as they think they should know to do what it is that they're doing. And when you realize that, if you look at the Olympics, you got 100 people that are really, really good at one thing. Every one of them thinks that everybody around them is really, really good at that thing and that they probably shouldn't be there, that they're the one that doesn't fit. But, that's the thing is knowing that everybody is wearing their best face most of the time, especially when they're out in public. And the way to really get to know somebody and find out, how they really live their life is to start spending a lot of time with them. Go to their house and hang out with them, on evenings or weekends or something. And you start understanding that, no matter who it is, no matter how high they are on the ladder or how low they are on the ladder, they're just the same as you are on the inside. Some people are better at wearing a mask than other people, but I didn't. My problem was that I was so naive for so long that I didn't know that most people were wearing a mask. It never occurred to me because I wear my emotions on my sleeve. I'm so wide open about everything that I feel because I wasn't raised to have any filters. I don't know how to manage my emotions. And so I assume that everybody else is being truthful about what they feel and what they think. And the truth is that most of them are not. And especially, if I'm the idiot in the room that everybody else is like, oh, Jesus, nobody's going to tell me that. Nobody's going to be honest about who they are and put themselves in my crosshairs so that I can go, make their life a mess. So it's, and whether it's me being bad or me being good, I can't compare the way that I feel to the way the other people look, because I'll lose every time, no matter what. Yeah. And it's going to happen. It's an automatic reaction when I see somebody that really impresses me or intimidates me. And that's the worst, is when I find somebody that intimidates me. I have such a horrible reaction to that. But being aware that no matter what it is, I probably have a false reading, and I definitely am not seeing the full picture on who they are.
Sure. Yeah, I had to learn that a long time ago in the real estate business, even in my dad's business, but it really came out in the real estate business because a lot of people dress like they are really successful. And when you walk into a room, like when I first started in real estate, I had no money. I was broker than broke. And man, my wife and I scraped together money to buy shoes at Target for me, like loafers. And I was wearing these like crappy pants from Old Navy, dress pants. And I felt like, how can I ever impress anybody with this outfit on when everybody else has a suit on, and like nobody's going to do business with me? And it was like shutting me down. But when I became really successful very quickly in real estate, wearing those Target shoes, and I realized when I started looking at the behind the scenes numbers, because they're all public, when I started looking at the numbers, sales numbers of these guys that were driving S-Class Mercedes-Benzes and wearing these fancy ass suits, I'm like, holy shit, I've doubled what they do. And I'm still wearing Target shoes. And it taught me so much, especially out here where I live in LA. Ego runs this town. It's paradise out here, and you don't know who's got cash and who doesn't. You can obviously assume the guy in the Rolls Royce has cash, but you don't know. Somebody might be funding that. Somebody could be a Ponzi scheme that's waiting for its day and on American greed. You never know. Mm-hmm. And then there's the people that just go out and hustle and make it, and there's no differentiation. The Rolls Royce that they drive is the Rolls Royce that they drive. It is what it is. Yeah. But how does somebody, so like I said, part of my mission is to help high-level men reveal their most authentic self, right? And not have to worry about the clothes or the job or the car or the house or the vacations or the whatever. How does someone actually become who they want to be, who they don't even know they could be? Like, how do they start to clear the weeds a little bit to see what that potential is?
I think it's so important to own who you are and to not try to deviate from that. Don't ever try to impress other people, because that's validation seeking behavior, right? So
is that the thing though? Is that the catalyst?
I think that's the foundation thing, is that when you build all of these goals and you try to get to the emotional driver behind those goals. Why is this my goal? Is it to impress someone else so that they'll feel a certain way about me? Like, That's the stuff that you have to abandon. When you look at the people who are truly great achievers at whatever it is that they do, none of those people are trying to be someone else. They're all being their true, authentic self, and they have the confidence to not worry about what people think about that. Because when you are 100% who you are, some people are going to love you for that, and some people are going to hate you for that. And it's okay either way it goes. It doesn't matter what other people think. When you start following your dreams to satisfy yourself and to build your own sense of identity, and it's going to change. It doesn't just have to be one specific thing that you can never change your mind about. Mine's evolved, 100 times in the last 5 years. But I think it's not worrying about what other people think and being okay with being vulnerable. And I will tell you about vulnerability. For me, it is such a freeing thing. As I wrote this book, The Righteous Rage of a 10-Year-Old Boy, and I put every secret about bad feelings that I ever had about myself in this book and put it out for the world to see. And it was a terrifying thing in the beginning, but the more I talk about it and the conversations that has driven with people is unbelievable. But I don't have any fear of anybody coming at me with anything anymore because I've already put all my secrets out there. I've given everybody all the stuff, so it's not a weapon anymore. Secrets are what really tear us apart. And I think whether that secret is a feeling that you have about yourself or something that's happened to you at some point in the past or something that you did, the great fear that we have as a human being that somebody is going to find out those secrets. And I think that when you can let those secrets go and not worry about all of that stuff and just be who you are and what warts and all, with all the mistakes and all the horrible shit we've done. And I've done a ton of horrible things in my life that I'm ashamed of. But not letting that stuff own me, that's who I was on that day. This is who I am today. And I am proud of who I am today, and this is what I'm doing today. And if you want to be a part of that, that's great. And if you don't, that's also great. I don't want you dragging me down if you don't believe in what I'm doing. And it's framing that mentality, and most of that comes with confidence, but it's a package thing of believing in yourself until you can believe in yourself, and surrounding yourself with people who will support you regardless of what's going on. And just not worrying about what other people think about that. And that's at any level. And, if you're the kid on the playground, or if you're the CEO of the $10 billion company, it's the exact same concept. The things that are going to tear you down are the same, and the things that are going to make you great are the same. It doesn't matter what station you are in life. It's all the internal tools, the emotional things that build us up and tear us down are the same for everybody.
Yeah, so the one thing I wanted to dig into from the beginning of this segment is like that one little catalyst, that one little piece that someone that pops up in their head or their thought or their awareness, and they go, okay, this isn't for me, this isn't authentic. So that's what I was asking you about is, how does someone know when they're not being authentic? Very quickly, because they could be in total denial. No, I really want this. But in the moment that they start thinking about, this is what actually I was thinking about when you were saying this, the moment that you start thinking about what others will think about this thing I'm going to do or buy or say, is the moment that you step out of your authenticity and step into worrying about what people think. Is that right?
I think so. And to a degree, I'm a professional guy. I need to project a professional image. We have a business. Sure. I have a couple of businesses. And so, to the effect that I can't, drive around in a truck that's got 17 different trucks cobbled together into one and try to convince people that I'm a successful business person and they should give me their money and their trust, right? So you have to put out an image that's consistent with who you are and what it is that you're doing. But that's different than buying the bright yellow Corvette simply because people are going to look at you and think that you must be amazing when you go down the road. And if you are a car guy and you love everything about the horsepower and the way that the interior is designed on that car, that's a completely different thing than needing the ego stroke of someone looking at you and thinking that you must be more than you are. And I think most of us know when we're doing that. And I bought a new truck a couple of years ago. I got a big 1-ton truck, and it's nice, and it's got a 12-inch screen in the dash, and I feel like I'm driving somebody else's truck when I'm in that. And sometimes I get that twinge of, I'm taking this truck instead of my other truck, which is more of a beater, simply because I don't want people to see me in that. And I have to check myself on that and be like, all right, there's no reason for me to drive the big diesel truck when I can drive my little half-ton pickup and get this job done. I'm just going to the feed store. And the opinion of the 19-year-old kid loading the feed bags in my truck doesn't really have anything to do with how I feel about myself. But I have to remind myself of that, because I fall victim to it just like everybody else. And it's mostly because I spent most of my life seeking that approval and that attention from somebody else that, I'm very aware of when I'm doing it, but I wasn't for a long time. I had to train myself. And most of it is just, anytime that I'm making a decision, if it's something that's questionable, maybe I stop and check myself on, why am I doing this? What's my motivation behind this? And if I'm needing the approval of someone else in that moment, what is lacking in my system that I'm doing for myself? What belief am I giving credence to that's not true? Because the truth is, I don't need anybody else's approval because I approve of myself. But I still have to, work my way to that answer every day.
So what we're really talking about here is removing distractions to determine and get into a self-love pattern and self-value pattern that only you can control, only you have to control. You don't need the outside world to control it, right? I mean, that's removing distractions is like think about the distraction of you're looking out at your two trucks and you just have to go to the feed store real quick. Think about the distraction that is in that moment, whether it's for 5 seconds or 5 minutes, there's a distraction there. And when you compound those distractions over forget about a day, an entire hour of how many things you're distracted by based on something external. When you can remove those distractions, that, in my opinion, is how people can really tap into who they are and find those deep down wells of love and information within themselves that they've been seeking from the outside world for so long. When you clear that, when you let that brain be in power.
It's so hard to do. I think, like all things in my life, I call it living with intention, because I spent most of my time just being reactionary and going from, like a pinball, just bouncing off of one thing into another. And living that intentional life and making intentional decisions, it means questioning myself like on a regular basis. But you're talking about removing those trappings. And most of this happened for me in therapy. When I stopped worrying about what other people think of me and just start being, in my daily activities, doing things that are congruent with my goal and that are going to get me to the end that I'm looking for in whatever the situation is. Getting rid of that need for someone else's approval on what I'm doing, whether it's driving down the road or what I'm wearing or the website that I built for somebody. None of that stuff matters. And it's the clutter that fills up so much of our time, is trying to impress other people, trying to manage the image on this or that, and manage other people's perceptions of who we are and what we're doing. And being able to set that stuff down with intention and say, I'm not worried about any of that, like in the feed store case, I get that moment to think about that when I'm like, okay, I have to unhook the horse trailer from that truck in order to take it to the feed store. So why am I willing to do that when all I'm doing is getting 3 bags of feed? That will, that's when I'm getting intentional, is taking that moment to examine why I'm doing this. But the distractions there's a million of those, the whirlwind of the world around us, and we're trying to make our way through it, is like those distractions are what keep us from ever achieving our goals to begin with. We get so wrapped up in the stuff that doesn't matter, and we don't actually have enough time to do the stuff that does matter. And I think that's the great trap that so many of us fall into, and I've fallen into it just like everybody else. But it's the distractions that will tear us down to the ground.
Yeah, 100%. So 2 more things I want to talk to you about is male emotion and our societal pressure of, and look, this isn't all of society, but it's a majority of being tough and not showing emotion and keeping your head down and getting through it or powering through it. And there's also that hustle and grind bullshit mentality with a lot of people that we know in business who are just in this like hustle, grind, keep your head down and get it done. But there's an entire other world that you're missing, which is mainly yourself, your spouse, your children, your communication, sex and love. Like there's all kinds of stuff going on there. How can men, because I mean, this is a vulnerable topic, and this is it's tough. It's still tough for me to cry in front of my wife, even when I'm feeling really emotional, because I've got this like program, not from my parents, by the way, just from guys I hung out in high school and college. It was not a thing. Now I have many good friends today who I could call and cry to all day long, and I do, but it's rare. So two things. One is, how do men tap into that and just make it okay within themselves to become emotional, even if it's in private? And how do you seek out or find other men who are more well-rounded and join up with them to be able to express yourself fully?
That's a tough one. It's so heavy, but I also think it's so important. I grew up, like I talked about earlier with my dad, his only emotion was rage. It was the only thing he ever showed. And so I didn't have good examples of how to properly feel your feelings and how to express things. Like, as a young man going out into the world on my own, I didn't even know how to express affection because my parents had such a weird, emotionally devoid relationship that I didn't understand how a couple should treat one another. And I also didn't understand that all of the feelings that I felt inside are normal and that everyone has those. I felt like I was alone in that, and that there was something wrong with me. And I remember in my early 20s seriously considering if I should check myself into a loony bin of some sort, because I've got all of this crazy stuff going on inside, and I don't know how to manage it. I don't even know how to identify half of it. And some of it was feeling guilty about having the feelings that I felt. And I think a lot of that came from, my mom punishing me, put me in the trash can when I felt excited. So I have this whole guilt association with being excited about something. And that I still struggle with that. I'm working on that today. And feeling like, no matter what I feel, that I need to change that. And I did that for a long time. I regulated my emotions with alcohol and with cigarettes. Like if I got excited, I would smoke a cigarette to calm down. If I was angry, I would smoke a cigarette to change that. I would smoke a cigarette no matter what I felt, to try to feel different. And I didn't understand for a long time that it is okay for me to feel the way that I feel right now, whether that's good or bad. And it's important for me to sit with the feeling and let it be what it is, and know that it's going to pass and change into something else. And that, I can't be hurt by my feelings. And the fact that I have these feelings don't mean that there's something wrong with me, or that I'm less than, or that I'm not a man, or whatever the label is that we want to put on it. And when I realized that everyone else around me has feelings and we're all choking them back, and I started understanding how my attempts to repress my feelings display, and then I start recognizing that behavior in other people, and I realize, okay, this guy's not willing to feel what he's feeling. And so rage is the number one. It's a topical emotion, and we all get angry when we're feeling something else, and we use anger to mask that and hide it. And I think it's important to recognize in ourselves when we're doing that, when we're diverting, when we're trying to change the way that we feel instead of just accepting the way that we feel and being okay with it, when we're trying to hide it. Like everything else, it's being intentional about, let's look at this, let's examine it and figure out what it is that I'm feeling and why I'm feeling, and know that it's okay for me to feel this way. And a lot of it is when we get triggered, when we have insecurities that get triggered. And I'll tell you where mine happens the most these days is with AT&T. And I don't want to get sued by AT&T, but our business phones and internet. Yeah, exactly. It's not representative of this podcast or its host. No. But, every interaction I have with AT&T is an absolute disaster. But when I have to call them for something and I dial 1-800 and I don't even get to the second zero dialed, and I'm already in a rage, like I'm in a blackout rage, my hands are shaking. And if I make it through the phone tree to an actual person, I am going to just do my best to destroy them before they ever even say their name and find out what my problem is. Like,
Yeah.
that's not just about AT&T. That's about me feeling, repressed and pushed down and ignored, and no one's, willing to acknowledge the fact that I'm getting screwed over. And, that goes all the way back to my childhood. And so I'm trying to punish some poor call center worker for the sins of the father, right? And when I'm aware of that, I can get calm and understand that this is not a true feeling. This is a feeling that's got about 300 layers, and it has nothing to do with the situation at hand. And I am going to set that one aside and feel something more appropriate, which is, perhaps slightly defensive, because this could still go wrong, but with a positive outlook that, I am here to represent myself in the best way possible and not be a dick to somebody just because my dad was a dick to me. But,
that's right, man.
Emotional management is something that I am still so brand new at. I feel like I'm at level 1, and everybody else learned this stuff in kindergarten, and I'm learning it in my 40s, right?
Oh,
but the truth is,
yeah.
no, it's not that. That's not the way it is at all. Everybody is struggling to get through this, and the fact that we can make noises with our mouth and even sort of communicate to other people what's going on inside of our head is amazing. But it is certainly not a perfect process. Like, communication challenges, when people are really good at communicating, still happen. So if we're not even being intentional and being aware of what our feelings are, we're telegraphing stuff onto other people that is unintentional, and we're unaware of it half the time. And I think that the emotional management starts with being aware of what we're feeling, and then being aware of how we're projecting that onto other people, and then trying to, figure out a direction that we want it to go and start making changes. But it all starts with self-awareness.
Yeah. And awareness is scary, and it's what will free you. And I think a lot of people avoid awareness, because then with awareness, what do? You got to actually make a move, because now you now know what you didn't know. And now what you're going to do with it, you're going to just, you're going to fight in the resistance. So awareness is beautiful, because in that scary, it's like I talk about on here all the time, and in a lot of our coaching programs, you are in charge of making fear from a headwind into a tailwind. And if you can do that, then awareness is your best friend. You'll want to learn more about yourself. You want to discover traumas from your childhood, because in that, not only are you going to have a more fulfilling and authentic life, but you might be able to help somebody else out like you and I do. And that is really fulfilling. Really fulfilling.
That is amazing.
So, absolutely amazing. And that's legacy. Money, I was talking to my buddy the other day, and he said, and he's a really wealthy guy, and he said, I'm not going to leave my kids anything. Because I said to him, at our level, man, how do we introduce struggle to our children when we had to struggle to get to where we are, but we provide this lifestyle because we want to for our kids? And he said, don't give them any money. Like, I'm not going to leave them any money. I'm going to teach them how to make money. I'm going to give them loans if they want to start a business, but I'm not going to leave them with any money. My legacy is what I teach them, not what I leave them with monetarily or physically. And I thought, you know what, that's pretty cool. I think I agree with that. And we can go down that rabbit hole, but yeah, dude, I appreciate you being on here, man. It's been, it's over an hour. I appreciate you being on here, and really a ton of valuable information for the audience to bite on. Where can people find you if they want to get a hold of you?
You can find everything you want to know about me on my website at jboydlong.com. It's jboydlong.com. And I've got links to social media. I've got a blog on there with a lot of personal development blogs, and all of my books are listed, and everything that you need to know. Beautiful.
Justin, thanks for being here, man. The book is Righteous Rage of a 10-Year-Old Boy. And I have not read this yet, but I really enjoyed what I read about you. I really love this conversation. Thanks for what you're doing for the world, man, for just getting out of your own way for society's sake. It's pretty noble. I appreciate it, and I know our audience certainly has.
Well, thank you for having me on the show, and I really appreciate that guys like you are creating platforms where we can have these conversations and help change the world.
My pleasure, man. All right, audience, thanks for listening, and we will catch you on the next one.